Vice President Joe Biden and Congressman Paul Ryan they're getting ready right now to go head-to-head in their first and only vice presidential debate that starts a little bit more than 24 hours from now. But it's Mitt Romney's huge debate win that still has a lot of people talking. Yesterday, in my exclusive interview, I asked Romney if the man who prepared him for that performance, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, was actually a tougher debater than the president turned out to be.
But people make their own choice. Senator Portman is very effective. I think President Obama and I both had a good chance to describe our respective views as to how we'd do a better job. And I frankly think I benefited from the fact that rather than having people learn about me from ads prepared by my opposition, they got to actually hear what I would do from myself. And I think that helped me. I think the president also got to lay out his plans, and people were able to make a comparison. But as for Rob Portman, he's a pretty effective guy.
Were you surprised by the president's performance?
Well, I actually thought he described pretty appropriately and pretty effectively his policies. I just happen to disagree with those policies. I mean, when we talked about the economy, he really is not proposing anything he hasn't talked about for the last 4 years, which is another stimulus, hiring more government workers, picking winners and losers in industries that he favors, raising taxes. These are ideas he's had for some time, and frankly, we've tested those ideas over the last 4 years, and they have not led to the kind of job growth Americans want. But, you know, I think the challenge that he has is that his ideas are just not demonstrating the kind of results he would hope for, and people recognize that.
Are you confident, Governor, that Paul Ryan will take on Joe Biden Thursday night the way you took on the president?
You know, I don't know how Paul will deal with this debate. Obviously, the vice president has done, I don't know, 15 or 20 debates during his lifetime. Experienced debater. This is, I think, Paul's first debate. I may be wrong. He may have done something in high school. I don't know. But it'll be a new experience for Paul. But I'm sure he'll do fine. And frankly, Paul has the facts on his side. He has policy on his side. And we also have results on our side. So I think you'll find in the final analysis that people make their assessment on these debates not so much by the theatrics and the smoothness of the presenter, but instead on whether they believe the policies being described, the pathway being described, will make their life better or not. And I just think the American people recognize that the president's policies are not something we can afford for 4 more years. We just can't afford more of what we've gone through, and they want something new.
Governor Romney speaking with me yesterday. Let's discuss in our strategy session. Joining us right now, CNN political contributor Roland Martin and Republican strategist Rich Galen. Guys, thanks very much for coming in. Let me start with you, Roland. Representative Ryan, he says now he expects Joe Biden, the vice president, to come at him like a cannonball. His word, cannonball. Is there concern that Biden could be too forceful as opposed to the way the president behaved in that first debate?
Well, of course not. First of all, if you look at the Vice President Biden's speech at the Democratic National Convention, he knows how to shift tone. Look, this is a guy who was over the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, of course, during those confirmation hearings for Supreme Court justices. And so I think he relishes the opportunity to actually do this here because Team Obama, frankly, needs to have a different narrative. And so I would suggest to Congressman Ryan that he do prepare for a tough grilling. But also keep in mind, it was Vice President Biden who was a lead negotiator for the White House in these deficit talks. And so Ryan won't be able to come in and somehow own the economic conversation. Biden gets to show his foreign policy experience as well. I think this is going to be a much more pivotal debate. And I think it is important for Vice President Biden to turn the corner in terms of the momentum, for Ryan to continue it based upon last week.
These debates obviously do matter. Just take a look at what happened last week. So, right. Rich, you think it's going to get nasty, or will it be very polite but substantive?
I think the latter. I think it'll be polite but substantive. But Roland, I wrote this morning in Mullings that I can't imagine that Chicago wanted the narrative and the pivot point of this campaign to rest on the shoulders of Joe Biden in his debate with Ryan. And the other part of this is that, the vice presidential debates, the younger of these folks, and I go all the way back to Dan Quayle, the bar is much lower. And you remember, Wolf, that if you were in the hall that night the Quayle, who was it, the guy from Texas?
Lloyd Benson.
Yeah,
Lloyd Benson. A fellow Texan. Come on, Rich.
Yeah, I know. I just couldn't think of his name. But the people in the hall thought Quayle did well enough. It looked different on television. Sarah Palin last cycle did well enough. Biden clearly won the debate, but she didn't make a fool out of herself. So the bar is much lower for Ryan than it is.
No, I can't accept that, Wolf. And at some point, we got to be honest when we have these conversations. We are having a vice presidential debate tomorrow. This is for the person who is a heartbeat away from the presidency. I don't want to hear any conversation about a low bar. I wrote a column last week on CNN.com saying I'm tired of lowering expectations for people who are running for president or the vice president. I have a high bar tomorrow night for Vice President Biden, a high bar for Congressman Paul Ryan. I don't want somebody to simply come out, say their name, and it's all good. They should be able to converse about policy. They should be able to talk about it. And so forget just it's okay. No, raise the expectations. We do it for our kids in the classroom. Let's do it for the folks who want to be VP.
Well, this isn't for you or for me. We know who we're voting for. It's for those the people who may still be on the fence.
But they're the vice president.
Well, I understand that, but I think but when we're talking about how people will react to this, I think the expectations for the vice president are far higher than they are for a congressman who's got far less experience.
Hold that thought for a second, because I want to just put on the screen this poll we did before the first presidential debate back at the end of September. We asked who will win the vice presidential debate. 39% thought Biden would, 55% Ryan. Remember, that was before the debate. That's expectations pretty high for Ryan going forward. But let me play this clip. This is the president today speaking on the Tom Joyner morning radio show, talking about his performance last week.
The debate, I think it's fair to say I was just too polite, because, it's hard to sometimes just keep on saying what you're saying isn't true. It gets repetitive. But the good news is that's just the first one. I think it's fair to say that we will see a little more activity at the next one.
Was it just, Roland, that he was too polite in that first debate? Was that the reason he didn't do as well as Romney?
He was way too polite. He should have been far more aggressive, and he allowed far too many of Romney's lies to simply go by and not slapping them back. And so he should have been far more aggressive in terms of challenging Mitt Romney. And as my good friend Joe Madison of Sirius XM Radio has said on my show, it was very simple. President Obama showed up. Candidate Obama showed up. And so I think he got a swift kick in the butt, and he realizes that he simply can't go in there and be Mr. Nice. He has to get his head in the game and focus. When Romney sits here and makes something up, you tag him on it. You don't simply let it slide. You wait on the moderator to do it.
Hold your thought, Rich, for a moment.